runways 20 right and 20 left. Caution, simultaneous operations to closely space parallel runways. Aircraft south of hotel taxiing on Alpha be advised. Runway 20 left departures make immediate southeast turn over Alpha. Use caution for multiple cranes, various quadrants. The clearance delivery frequency for all aircraft is 118.0. Advise on initial contact. You have information Zulu.
Okay, we're taxiing out of John Wayne Airport out of ACI North, and I'm with Anuj here in his SR-22 turbo normalized. We're going to do some instrument flying. He does a lot of flying, does a part of work, but we're going to do out and do a little bit of IFR training and some actual weather. Got a great day for it. And take you along for this probably an hour flight out in some real IFR conditions.
13. Rich.fwr, Juliet Romeo, John Wayne Tower, cross-road turbulence for an Airbus in the upwind, early left turn approved. Your discretion. Right, choose your left at kilo, clear for takeoff.
Choose your left kilo, clear for takeoff, early left turn approved, caution story, keep running for me. I think you missed the takeoff for
70.
Yeah,
75.
Hold short right, choose right out.
80, rotating.
Hold short, 20 right. Yeah, 6
Positive rate of climb. I'll leave the flaps in a little bit.
Vector on a heading of 190, inbound for signal peak.
Original, Kilo Charlie, John Wayne Tower, proceed direct to the tower, make the left chop, right, choose your left.
Sorry, say again, 1 Kilo Charlie?
1 Kilo Charlie, proceed direct to the tower.
Kilo Charlie, you got it, 20 left.
Okay, flaps coming up. 175 heading.
4 Julie Romeo, contact South Cut Tip.
Departure, we're going for Jermaine.
Bravo, just be advised, weather at Van Nuys is 1 1/4 miles with heavy rain, 900 feet overcast or broken on the ceiling.
See what the weather is at Palomar.
Turn 270 and
Scattered 6,000. We're going to 5, right? 5, yep. Should be in the clouds here. Yep.
There we go.
So probably, in the flying that I do, which is in the training with other pilots, fly with a lot of pilots, give you a couple of the things that I see most frequently.
Yeah.
One broad statement that's pretty fundamental is getting in a hurry, and zipping through stuff that you may know from repetition is just seatbelts, lights, and
yes,
stuff that you can just kind of zip through. But what that creates is an environment where you start to build a habit of zipping through stuff.
Yep.
And now you're zipping through stuff like seatbelts and lights, but you may be also zipping through things that are important,
right?
Like, briefing an approach, or
right,
making sure that you've got the airplane set up properly, configured properly, that kind of stuff. So just slow down in general is a good thing.
Wind your watch, slow down,
take a deep breath.
To do the
and then that gets into, okay, I'm going to go slower, so I'm going to start preparation for the approach a lot earlier.
So after Oceanside, they put us on that heading. And we're going to cross somewhere probably between Escon and Luna, between 2,600 and 3,300 feet, most likely. And our SILS minimum 527. about 200 AGL, 3/4 mile visibility. So we're well above those minimums. Missed approach, climb on a 3000 heading to 245 on Oceanside, Vortac, radial 145, the Oceanside VOR and hold. So that's pretty self-explanatory.
The brief, you know, used to be really important to, you know, identify and do a lot of things with, because we didn't have the automation we have now, especially with G1000.
Right.
So really, like, one of the most important things to me, and again, it's driven off of experience and also training pilots, is
switching tanks.
Where I'm going to be altitude-wise at the final approach fix, because I want to be stable and configured at the final approach fix. And I know from experience, this is a good airport, I know from experience at this airport that they have a tendency to bring you in high. And so
drop you down,
you're above the glide path and they clear you for the approach. Now you've got to do some extra steps to get down. If you know that going into it, and you're conscious of the altitude at the final approach fix, and you're constantly reminding yourself, I'm going to be high. Right. So you can think of, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to maybe slow down. I'm going to have to go to vertical speed mode and go down and get the glide slope.
Capture from above, yeah.
Right. And if you can brief that, and, you know, like if you're at Long Beach on the ILS, they always bring you in at 1600. They never slam dunk you because there's no terrain. But out here, you can see the terrain.
Right.
And so, you know, that would be something that I would brief. Is there going to be any terrain that I have to think about? If there is, I can probably expect that they're going to bring me in a little high. You've probably experienced it at John Wayne.
Yeah.
They do it there too.
Yep.
Especially, now coming from the north, not so much because you're on a downwind, but if you're coming from the east, you got to clear those mountains.
First,
you know, so that's something that I always brief is...
And that's the important stuff.
Because you think about what happens near the final approach fix. You get cleared for the approach. You get often the longest clearance.
Yeah.
You know, turn left heading 210, maintain 3000 till established. You clear for the ILS, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
You may throw an altimeter setting. And winds in there.
It's like,
that's too much. And now you're high.
Yeah.
And now I got to read that clearance back, and I got to go to vertical speed mode and go down and get it. You know, so to me, I like to always know, how am I doing relative to the altitude at the final approach fix? Because again, I want to be configured and stable at the final approach fix. If I got to hit vertical speed, go down at 1,000 feet a minute.
Yeah. So that would be Sidru at 2,300 is what we're expecting.
Yeah.
Terrain in the area is up to basically 4,500 feet.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And, you know, Sidru is 2,300 and we're at 5, so I got to lose 2,500 feet. Yeah, it's not too big of a deal out here.
Right.
So I'm not too worried about it now, but I might be, it's in my mind at least. And so that's something on a brief that, you know, you might be briefing a missed approach procedure in detail, but today there's a low probability that we're going to have to do a missed approach. I'm not saying don't brief it, but
that's not as
it's not as critical to me in this environment as you know,
other stuff,
especially if you're IMC,
right?
And it's busy. And then here, when I heard him say expect vectors to final, in my opinion, now I'm on a heading.
You're already loaded.
I want to match what I'm doing with what's on the system. So I would activate
it now. Might as well.
Vectors to final.
We're already able to do that. Yeah. It saves a step later.
Yeah. And then it validates what he told me. Right? If you forget, you can say, well, I'm active, so he must have given me a heading.
Right.
And he also said expect radar vectors for the ILS. So that would be, you know, another thing.
Yeah.
There's no reason to wait. Now you have much better situational awareness with the ILS painted. Verify the green needle, and that triggers you to just make sure all your nav stuff set up.
And
do you fly your approaches with flaps 50%? Or do you go full flaps at the...
usually I'll put them in at the end.
Once landing's assured?
Once landing's assured, I'll put in full flaps. Somewhere outside the final approach fix, I'll try to get the first notch of flaps in.
Yeah.
Maintain 8,000 directors.
I mean, it just depends. Like a lot of times they're like, keep your speed up, you know, 150 until final approach fix, so then you got to put in afterwards.
Right. And see, that's
not really great.
well, the way I was always taught, and it was really beat into my head, is you're configured for landing at the final approach fix.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so now, what I would say in this airplane, what configured to me would mean is on speed with flaps in the 50%.
So we should you want to slow it down then? Slow down.
Well, unless, of course, he says, you know, keep the speed up beyond your flaps, 50% speed. Now, you know, am I going to accept that? And if I accept it, I'll accept it, and that gives me the ability to, you know, to accept not being fully configured or configured at the final approach fix. But I don't know. That's a tough one because you got to lose in this airplane. You got to lose. You know, if they're telling you to be at 150, I'd probably say unable. I can't give you 150. Maybe I'll give you 130. I'm not going to give you 150.
Right.
Because that puts me...
4 Juliet Romeo, turn right heading 150, descend and maintain 3,300.
All right, turn 150, 3,340 miles. That was quite a bump, huh?
That was. Yeah, that gets me in the category of maybe unstable if I'm
that fast,
plus 25 knots at the final approach fix, and you're going to be coming downhill now. You know, that's probably more than I'd want to tackle in this airplane with flap speed at 119. Because I think that's critical. I think most people agree to be stable at the final approach fix.
They're slowing it way down. Try to get our flaps in here.
Yeah, and this airplane has that higher or lower flap speed.
Yeah,
so
that's
makes a difference.
Yeah, it makes it tougher.
I think
number 654 Juliet Romeo, you're about a mile and a half from ESCON. Turn right heading 210, maintain 3,300 until established. Clear for the ILS runway 24 approach.
All right, turn 210, 3,300, established, cleared, ILS 24 approach, Palomar 4 Juliet Romeo.
So here's a good example, right?
We're above, we gotta dive down into it.
Yep. So at least we know, we talked about it, and we're expecting it.
Right.
Because a lot of people, when it's that close, they might hit approach, and they never get it.
They never get it.
They just keep distancing themselves from it, and then when they realize it's like,
Right.
And then a lot of people in that scenario, you know what the first thing they do is? Turn the autopilot off.
Just hand fly it.
And try to go down and get it. Now you're really unstable, and really, if you can't get it, it should be a go-around, especially in IMC.
Palomar Tower, 654 Romeo, 2,600 on the ILS.
6540 Romeo, Palomar Tower, number 1, runway 24, clear to land.
24, clear to land, 4 Juliet Romeo.
Now this is nice. You know, you're stable. I like the speed. I mean, you're plus 10 on your landing flap speed, but you're still a long way from the airport.
Right.
And as long as the speed's slowly working its way back,
it's okay.
You know, so, you know, 115, 120 over the final approach fix, to me in this airplane
is okay.
Is pretty good. You know, so the other kind of mandate that I've had in this instrument environment is no configuration changes inside the final approach fix.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So leave flaps.
So going to landing flaps would breach that mandate that I've been taught. But I can accept it, right? In this airplane, as long as I can brief it.
Generally, it's an exception to a typical rule.
Exactly. And the question is, if you're shooting this to minimums, you know, are you going to go to landing flaps between minimums and the runway? Probably not, in my opinion.
Not to balloon back into the clouds.
So the brief on this approach is I'm going to fly 50% flaps until, you know, 500 feet or whatever, landing assured. I'm going to go to landing flaps. That's acceptable. If it was down to minimums, I would say, look, I've got the runway performance to land with 50% flaps, so I'm going to fly this whole approach through landing with 50% flaps. Now, I think Cirrus, in their book, don't really... They don't like really, 50% flaps, but I don't think, you know, do I want to fly the full approach at 100% flaps? I don't think so either.
No.
So this airplane has the landing performance to make this runway, so I do 50% flaps, and that also puts me in a better position for the go-around.
Yeah, okay. We could do it at 50, yeah. I haven't done a 50% landing.
It's up to you.
I haven't done one in a long while.
Let's do it.
Let's do it, yeah.
Minimums.
Number
98219 switch. Put a line runway 24, 98 Victor.
But you have the performance to do it, and that's the, you know, that to me is the critical element. If you accept the flaps 50% landing, you got to make sure you got the runway performance. Now, if you're doing a precision approach, 9 times out of 10, you'll have 99 times out of 100, you'll have the runway. Nice.